How's it, everyone? Welcome to another string review right here on OpenCourt. So today we're taking a look at a Tecnifibre string. Tecnifibre, I'm sure many of you know, makes some of the most arm-friendly multi-filaments on the market, such as the X1 biphase and the NRG. But today we're taking a look at one of their fusion strings, and that is the Tecnifibre RPX. Before we get into this review, be sure to overhead smash that like and subscribe button if you like this content to keep the reviews coming. Let's check out the Tecnifibre RPX. So the RPX is one of Tecnifibre's fusion strings. As you guys can see here, it says multifilament Polyfusion. So this is one of their unique strings that is actually 50% polyester and 50% polyamide fibers. Polyamide is basically nylon, so it's basically a hybrid in one string. This RPX is actually a reimagining of Tecnifibre's Duramix HD string. So if you guys have ever played with Duramix HD, this string is going to be very similar since this is a spiritual successor. The RPX comes in only two gauges, the 135 and 130 millimeter, which is a bit of a shame. I wish there was a 125 and thinner gauges because I personally like thinner gauges for more spin and feel. Also, one set of the RPX will run you about $13.95. I could not find a reel of this anywhere online, so I don't know if they exist or not, but one set of this will cost you around 14 bucks. So the RPX is the budget version of Tecnifibre's Triax and HDMX strings. Those are all in the Polyfusion category. The RPX doesn't have the same intricate weave that those other strings have, but the construction is pretty much the same, 50% poly, 50% nylon, so the response is going to be very similar. So this RPX is coated with something called SPL, which stands for Silicium Pyrogene Lubritech, which sounds like marketing mumbo jumbo, but it's basically an anti-abrasion, low friction coating. So it's basically there to facilitate that snapback. Multifilament strings tend to get stuck out of place a lot, so the SPL coating is supposed to help retain that snapback to get some spin and tension maintenance. So I'm a big hybrid guy. I like playing with hybrids, especially multifilaments. So I got the Tecnifibre RPX strung in two hybrid setups. I got it in the cross of my Head Boom Pro here, and I got it in the mains of my Prince Phantom 100X 1820. So I got them both strung at 52 pounds in the mains and 50 in the cross. I'm looking to see if it's going to unlock a little bit more power as a cross string in my boom, and I'm looking to see if it's going to still get good snapback and spin in this main of my Prince Phantom. All right, without further ado, let's jump onto the court and let's get into the pros and cons of the Tecnifibre RPX. So let's start with the pros of the Tecnifibre RPX. First of all, out of the two setups, I preferred the RPX in the mains rather than the crosses. I noticed the mains snapping back and providing decent spin out of my 1820 Prince Phantom, which surprised me. In the cross of my Boom Pro, the spin level was about the same as the Phantom, even though it's a more open 16x19. So spin-wise, I think it performed better in the mains of my Phantom. I did not notice a big jump in power with it as a cross, mostly because the RPX is half poly, so it feels stiffer than a hybrid setup that uses a full multifilament string. But with it in the mains of my low-powered Prince Phantom, there was a noticeable boost in power compared to using a full bed of poly. Now onto the string itself. What I like most about the Tecnifibre RPX is the level of control that comes with the power. These Tecnifibre fusion strings are meant to bridge the gap between polyester and multifilament, and this string did just that. I wouldn't go so far as to say it gets all the strengths and none of the weaknesses of both, but the slightly stiffer construction definitely allowed me to swing away without so much worry of the ball flying long compared to a full multi-string. Although the RPX is stiffer than something like X1 biphase, which is full multi, it still softened up the string bed enough that I actually felt the sweet spot to be bigger than a full bed of poly. Consequently, I found myself engaging in baseline rallies more often than I usually would because the power level and pace made rallying from the baseline easier. Because I'm an aggressive player, I usually struggle against opponents who can match me pace for pace and force me to play defensively. The RPX string made hitting ground strokes on the run easier, and it assisted me with pace and depth, so I could transition from defense back to offense easier than a full poly setup. When I was fully outstretched on the run, the RPX assisted in net clearance on my defensive slices and getting the ball over my opponent's head on reset lobs, or also if I just wanted to swing at it, it provided some decent pace on the run. My ground stroke game benefited greatly with this hybrid setup with the RPX. Another area of my game that saw a big boost in power was my serves. I don't have the fastest serves since I'm only 5 feet 5 inches, so anything that can help add extra pace and net clearance is welcome. The Tecnifibre RPX unlocked that extra oomph on the serves. The Prince Phantom 18x20 is by nature a low-powered racket, but flat serves with it was a lot more penetrating than I expected because of the RPX mains. I didn't notice too much of a boost in power in my Boom Pro with the RPX and the crosses, most likely because it's stiffer than other nylon multifilaments. I also really liked hitting slice flat serves, which focuses more on pace than actual slice. The RPX gave me easy net clearance and penetration. I was utilizing the slice serve into the body more often with these hybrid setups because the extra speed combined with the ball movement forced weak returns, which then my partner at net could easily put away. I think it also goes without saying that the RPX is a great volley string. It provides added power on mid and high volleys, but also good net clearance and depth on low volleys. The touch and feel is great because it is a multifilament and has good dwell time to hit drop shots and angle volleys, but the slightly stiffer construction gives it more control than a hybrid using a full multi setup. It's difficult to say whether I like the RPX more from the baseline or the net because I liked it from both areas, but I did find myself sticking to the baseline and engaging in baseline rallies more often than I would with a full poly setup, only because I never felt defensive battles would put me at a disadvantage with the added power of the RPX hybrid, and also it wasn't as taxing on my arm to hit ground strokes repeatedly with a full bed poly. Now let's move into the cons of the Tecnifibre RPX. I think the added benefit of power, feel, and depth also comes with the drawback of less spin potential. This is the trade-off you get when you opt for a hybrid instead of full poly setups, and I have yet to find a hybrid setup that generates more spin than a full bed of poly. With that being said, the RPX and the mains of my Phantom got respectable amounts of spin on the ground strokes. The kick serves got more spin than I was expecting, but that is most likely due to the thin beam and headlight balance of the Phantom racket itself rather than the RPX strings. With the RPX and the cross of my Boom Pro, I noticed the poly mains shaving away the coating of the RPX after a few play sessions, and the poly mains were starting to get stuck out of place relatively early, which affected the spin levels. It took a little longer for the coating to wear out in the mains of my Phantom, but eventually it did and the mains started getting stuck. If you are a heavy spin hitter, you might want to use a slick round poly cross to elongate the spin life of the RPX in the hybrid setup. Secondly, the Tecnifibre RPX is softer than what I use because I mostly use full bed poly, but in terms of multi-filaments, the RPX is stiffer because of that 50% poly construction. If you are thinking of trying out hybrid setups because you have tennis elbow, the RPX and other Tecnifibre Fusion strings most likely won't be soft enough for you. Stick to X1 biphase or NRG if you want a truly soft and comfortable experience. Other than these two issues, I really found nothing else to complain about with the RPX. So now let's get into who the Tecnifibre RPX string is for. If you are looking to try this in a full bed, I believe it's mostly meant for someone who wants the decent control that comes with poly strings without the harsh response of the stiff string bed. If you like hybrids, the RPX is most in line with someone who wants a little more power without sacrificing the control of stiffer strings. I like the RPX better as a main because it is actually quite durable for a multi, but if you want to preserve the spin generation a bit, go with a slick round poly in the cross. I personally really like the Triax, which is the most expensive option in the Tecnifibre Fusion line, but if that is too expensive for you, the RPX is a good budget option and will perform similarly. I do want to review the Triax on this channel in the future, and I know hybrids aren't for everyone, so I will try to review more multifilaments and full beds as well. If you guys have any suggestions for good control multis, please leave them in the comments and I'll try to look into them. But overall, the RPX is a fantastic string, very similar to the Duramix, which I also liked, so I urge you guys to give this string a try. Thank you for watching this review of the Tecnifibre RPX tennis string right here on OpenCourt. If you guys like this content, be sure to overhead smash that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you on an OpenCourt.